Without you, this may have never happened, so we all owe you a great debt of gratitude.
Sunset, Santa Monica.
Good evening and welcome to Marijuana, Compassion and Common Sense, the show that tells you the truth about marijuana, the facts about its medicinal uses, and try to blow away all the smoke surrounding the legal mumbo-jumbo that makes it difficult for you to access this very important medicinal herb. Good evening, my name is Lanny Swerdlow. I'm director of the Marijuana Anti-Prohibition Project. We are a medical marijuana patient support group and law reform organization based in the Inland Empire. But our show goes out throughout Southern California, and if you're in somewhere else, we'd like to thank you especially for watching our show tonight. I want to talk about something that's a little more personal at the beginning of the show tonight, and that has to do with what I've learned as a nursing student about marijuana and the other substances that are abused regularly in American society. Now, there was an advertisement that's been running fairly regularly. You may have seen it in the newspapers. It's got a big headline. It says, marijuana and your teen's mental health. And what it does is it kind of lists some studies that kind of show that marijuana has a negative impact on your teen's mental health. Now, I'm not encouraging teenagers to smoke marijuana, and I'm not saying that it may not have something of an effect on their mental health. The question is, how important an effect does it have on teens' mental health compared to the other substances which they are exposed to? We've got all this emphasis on marijuana. Where's the emphasis on the other drugs? And the question is, how significant is the mental health effects on marijuana on a person? How significant are the physical effects of marijuana on a person? And how does it relate to other drugs? Well, I think what you might find interesting is what I have learned as a nursing student. Last semester, I was in psychiatric nursing, and our textbook was called Psychiatric Mental Health Nursing. Now, this is a textbook that is used in nursing schools across the country. Probably one of the most widely used psychiatric nursing textbooks available. And part of psychiatric nursing has to do with substance abuse, because that's a big psychiatric problem, substance abuse. So how are our nursing students in the country being taught about substance abuse? How are they taught, what are they being taught about the various substances that are abused, including marijuana? Well, this book has a fairly long section on it, and this is the section that deals with both the physical and psychological effects of substance abuse. And the very first drug they talk about is nicotine. Right here, abused substances, and nicotine starts right here. And how many pages does this nursing textbook devote to the physiological and psychological problems of nicotine? Well, it's got a page here and a second page here, and there's a third page here. So it's devoting 3 entire pages to the problems caused by nicotine. The next substance it talks about is alcohol, right here. And now the next pages deal with these physiological and psychological problems that are caused by alcohol and what nurses need to know about. We have 3 pages on nicotine and alcohol. We have 1 page, 2 page, 3 pages, 4 page, 5 pages, let's see, 6 pages, 7 pages, 8 pages. 8 pages in this nursing textbook on the physiological and psychological problems caused by alcohol and how nurses have to deal with them. So what comes after nicotine and alcohol? Cocaine. And what's the effects of cocaine? Cocaine's a stimulant. And so we got 1 page and we got 2 pages, about 2.5 pages on cocaine. After cocaine, they feel they need to talk about the opiates, you know, like morphine and heroin and that kind of stuff. So what do? Well, there's 1 page here on morphine, here's a 2nd page, and here's a 3rd page. So they've got 3 pages on the opiates. And then we come to other commonly abused substances. And first they have hallucinogens like LSD and ecstasy, and they've got about a paragraph, 7, 8 sentences about that on ecstasy and LSD. Then they've got inhalants. That's like glue sniffing and that kind of stuff. And they've got almost half a page on inhalants because it's pretty dangerous stuff. And finally, the very last one they list is marijuana. And they've got 4 sentences. And they say, hey, it has some psychological problems, not physiological, but it's almost like a footnote. This is what nurses are being taught. Big problems with nicotine, big problems with alcohol, big problems with cocaine and the opiates, speed, that kind of stuff. But marijuana, what's the problem? Why are we running ads like this in newspapers about marijuana? Why are we arresting 700,000 people a year? Why are we spending 10 to 20 billions of dollars a year putting people in prison for marijuana? When the nurses of our country are being taught, as drugs go, it's relatively innocuous. And the reason, of course, is look who's paying for these ads. Look who's paying for these ads. These ads are run by the Office of National Drug Control Policy. And where do they get the money for these ads? Well, they get it from you, the taxpayers. That's one. But who else do they get their money from? Well, their 3 big corporate contributors are alcohol. They don't want to see marijuana legal. Tobacco. They sure as hell don't want to see marijuana legal. And who's the third one? The pharmaceutical corporations. They don't want to see marijuana legal either because they all stand to lose lots and lots and lots of money if marijuana becomes legal. Whether it's medicinally or recreationally, they all stand to lose billions of dollars. So let's spend all this time demonizing marijuana and let's ignore the drugs that our nurses are being taught are the real dangers to society. You know, the way they have these drugs listed in this book, nicotine was first, then alcohol, then cocaine, and other stimulants. The reason they have it in that order, although they didn't say it in the book, the reason they put it in that order, but the order has to do with the number of deaths. Nicotine was first because 450,000 people a year die from the effects of nicotine in this country. Alcohol, 50 to 75,000 people a year die. That's why alcohol was number 2. Distant third is cocaine and speed and all those kind of stuff. Maybe, I don't know, 10, 15,000 people. And when you finally get down to marijuana, which is 0, no one dies. And that may be the reason they listed marijuana as last, because it is the safest, least dangerous of all drugs. And yet our government makes out like it's this horrendous thing. Well, that's what this show is all about. This show is to teach you about marijuana and the truth about marijuana, not the nonsense that the government puts out on behalf of the alcohol, tobacco, and pharmaceutical companies. Not the stuff the government puts out on behalf of law enforcement who has their fingers in the big honeypot of marijuana prohibition that hires thousands of drug enforcement and police across the country to try to do what? Put people in jail who use a drug that the nurses are being taught is of very little consequence. So that's why we're on the show, and that's why we want you to watch our show and learn about marijuana. And if you really want to learn about it, we want you to come to our meetings. And we meet on the first Sunday of every month at the Cathedral City Public Library at 3 p.m. First Sunday. You can mark it on your calendar. Get your calendar out, and every month, mark on the first Sunday, 3 p.m., Cathedral City Public Library, Marijuana Anti-Prohibition Project has a meeting with speakers. We also meet on the second Wednesday of every month at 7:30 p.m. in Joshua Tree. That's in the high desert. We meet at the Joshua Tree Community Center. And you can mark that on your calendar. Second Wednesday every month, 7:30 p.m., Joshua Tree Community Center at 6171 Sunburst Avenue. So, we've got a great show for you tonight. Stick around. We're going to tell you about what else is coming up in just a moment. How interesting the show? Let me tell you how interesting. We've got an interview with Dr. Steve Hosea, a physician in Santa Barbara, who was at the Cannabis Therapeutics Conference. Marijuana plays a major role in therapy with his clients. we'll talk with him and learn about what that is. Also, we've got an interview with K. Kaufmann, a Coachella Valley journalist who's been following the medical marijuana story in Riverside County almost for the last several years, and she's got some very interesting insights. But first, we're going to start our show by concluding our interview with Anna Boyce. She's the registered nurse who became so involved with medical marijuana that she became a co-sponsor of Proposition 215. I'm here with Anna Boyce again, who was on our last show. Anna is a registered nurse who was one of the co-sponsors of Proposition 215, which legalized the use of marijuana medicinally in California, and the first one in the States. And I'm so proud to be here with you because without you, this may have never happened. So we all owe you a great debt of gratitude. But I want to talk to you about being a nurse and marijuana. And you had talked about in the last show that your first exposure is when you were a student nurse, just beginning to come out. How have you seen marijuana treated by the nursing profession over the years?
Fully supportive. I have not, up to this date, had a nurse, or even doctors for that matter, say it's a waste of, this is foolish, it's an addictive drug, it has no value. I have heard, in fact, if they weren't so frightened of the FDA and the police and all, they probably would come out and support it fully.
I know.
They would.
I know. The California Nurse Association and the American Nurses Association have endorsed the use of medicinal marijuana. So this is fairly a common position of nurses.
Because we know the value. And we know it's not addictive. And we know it's not hazardous.
And it's like, what's the big deal here? And yet, it is a big deal.
You can't fuck society. That's one of the things. When I started this, there was a lot of negativeness. I had phone calls. I went to meetings and I was ignored, ostracized, or they would say, oh, there's the marijuana nurse. That's the nurse that supports marijuana. But yet individually, it was, I'm on your side.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, how often do we hear police officers say, my brother, my sister, my aunt is using because none of the other drugs work. But will they go to Sheriff Corona and say to him, let's get on the other side of the bandwagon and support this? No. Mm-hmm. It's not a career-wise move. Amounts to that.
Yeah. And yet it's almost criminal in that it would be so beneficial to so many of the patients to be able to use this medicine.
I'm just kind of disappointed. When we first started this initiative back in '96, I made a $1,000 bet that we would be legal in 10 years. And I'm sorry to say, I don't believe we will be.
Oh my God, we only got 4 more months.
Yeah. No, November. No, but the person I bet with said it's okay. we certainly have gotten...
Maybe they'll give you another 10 years.
I hope so. But we have, look at what we've accomplished.
Yes.
Look at the states that are allowing it now. And again, it's not the stigma it had once.
Right. And even counties like Riverside County, which was so backwards, they're now allowing dispensaries to operate. It's like people are beginning to recognize this. If we can only get the federal government to back off, but they just seem intransient.
Well, I don't think we'll ever get the federal government because the pharmaceutical company is so powerful. Mm-hmm. And this is a drug, a herb, I would prefer calling it an herb really.
It is.
That we can grow and we can use at our own discretion, and there's no money in it for them. The very first year that I started this, back in '92, at that time the pharmaceutical company supported it.
Oh, really?
Yes. They came to the hearings and they were there, and then suddenly I think, it's my only opinion, that somewheres up there someone said, you can't. This is not a drug we're going to manufacture. This is something you can grow. This is an herb that's growing in your backyard. So why should we support you? And midstream, they didn't come back to the meetings or anything. But they were there to testify against it.
So, what? Yeah, well, it's all about
MONEY.
Yeah, it's interesting. You can get Marinol, which is synthetic THC, because the pharmaceutical companies can patent artificial THC, right, but they can't patent natural THC.
And it's such a shame because we've got this horrible thing like in this drug that would be considered the 21st, the greatest discovery of the 21st century if it was discovered by Pfizer today, is instead made illegal.
One of the assembly women, when we was presenting it to the health committee, I believe it was, had said she didn't think it should be sold anyway in the drugstores. That comment was made that maybe they put it in a capsule form and you could go buy it, etc. And she was very concerned that they would break into drugstores to take this. And she looked at me and she said, "Don't you agree?" And I said, "Well, I'll tell you, and this is on record, if I was breaking into a drugstore, I think I'd go for the heroin, the codeine, all of that. I don't think I would worry about marijuana because I could grow my own if I wanted it."
That's right. Yes, you could.
She didn't like it.
Yeah. Well, what would you say, I want to wrap up the discussion, but I would like you kind of make a comment of what you see the connection between being a registered nurse and what registered nurses could do to help this.
What can we do? I think, the American Nurses and the California Nurses Association are supporting it because we know the value. We know definitely it is an advantage. We know it's not addictive, it doesn't lead to other drugs, etc. I think the nurses need to band together and fully support it. Come out verbally, have interviews, talk to the patients, have the patients talk to their doctors, or get active in politics.
Well, nurses are probably the most respected profession in the United States. Probably have more status even than doctors as caring individuals. And I kind of look at it that it's the way the doctors diagnose patients and the way nurses diagnose patients. Doctors diagnose based on the disease, nurses diagnose based on symptoms. And it's
the results of those drugs.
Yeah, and so marijuana is a symptomatic relief drug and with very little danger. And so it would be like the thing that nurses should really be pushing.
Well, do we put a firecracker under them and hope that they move?
I sure hope so. If anybody can do it, it's the nurses and the California Nurses Association. Anna, thank you so much for joining us here on Marijuana, Compassion, and Common Sense. And I'm sure we'll be talking with you again sometime in the near future. Anna Boyce is a wonderful, warm, compassionate, caring person. And you can actually meet her. She comes out to about one of our meetings each year. So come on to our meetings at Cathedral City Library, and who knows, you might be at the meeting that you can meet Anna Boyce. Our next episode of our show is going to be an interview with Dr. Steve Jose. He is a physician in Santa Barbara who was at the Cannabis Therapeutic Conference. Marijuana plays a very important part in his care of his clients. Here with me now is Dr. Steve Jose, a medical doctor here in the city of Santa Barbara, where the conference on cannabis therapeutics is being held. Thank you very much for being here with me for a few minutes. Dr. Jose made this incredibly moving presentation on HIV and cannabis. And as I understand it, you moved here and you came here and you immediately started working with AIDS patients. Is that correct?
Well, I moved here in 1981, so that was really the beginning of the epidemic. I didn't realize what I was getting into when I moved here.
And how did you get involved with AIDS patients?
Well, I do infectious diseases. That's my specialty, and therefore it was natural to take care of people whose infections were the major result of depressed immune system.
And so you've been intimately involved in the change of the face of age, one might say, over the last 30 years, 25 years.
But that's exactly right.
And what do you think? You were here and you talked about, when did you first recognize that cannabis had some therapeutic value in AIDS patients?
Oh, I think probably 83, 84, because one of the major problems was wasting and weight loss that occurred. And we were really trying to find solutions for that. And we didn't have any good medicines, at least FDA-approved medicines anyway. And there's no question that cannabis clearly affects appetite. We use a lot of anabolic steroids as well. One of the questions I have is really which one works the best, or does a combination work best to help with wasting and weight loss?
How did you just come to find that cannabis would be a benefit? how did you discover cannabis?
Well, at a time when people were dying all around me, we were doing anything we could to try and save people's lives. We were getting money or getting pills from buyers clubs. We were using alternative medicines. People were using cannabis, and anything that we could use that would help, sort of by word of mouth. We'd say, well, how do you put on that 5 pounds? And they'd tell me, and so then I would tell someone else about it. It was really a more word of mouth that it.
And you're here at this. What do you think of the conference that you've been seeing the last couple of days?
I think it's an incredible conference. I've obviously been an advocate for medical marijuana for a long time. I honestly didn't realize all the other wonderful effects that medicinal marijuana has, and I actually, after hearing its effect on neuropathy pain and multiple sclerosis, I, at one of the breaks, called one of my patients and said, we need to get you some marijuana because it has dramatic effects and what we're doing isn't working. So lots of new information.
So actually, a direct benefit to one of your patients from coming to this conference here.
Unequivocally.
And one of the things we've had some problems with is working with our local AIDS patients group, the Desert AIDS Project, and they seem to be very fearful of marijuana. They won't allow it to be discussed. They won't allow our information to be put out there. They're afraid of dealing with marijuana. Why do you feel that is?
Well, the major reason that's the case is because they're not here at the conference. If they were here, it's all about education. I think the best way to fight the fear is with education. And how do you get people educated? One of the hardest things to do is educate physicians about new, different concepts. To me, that's the exciting part about this particular conference.
Okay, well, maybe we can get you to come down and talk to some doctors here about your experience with AIDS and marijuana as medicine. A lot of our viewers, and I know our people come to our meetings are AIDS patients, and now we have it direct from a doctor. You're doing the right thing. Doctor, thank you very much for joining us here, and see you more at the conference.
I hope so. Thank you.
Dr. Jose provides life-saving practice to his patients, and marijuana is part of that practice. It's part of what he uses to make the lives of his patients better, more enjoyable, and healthier. Now, we're going to go into a slightly different perspective now, as we're going to be interviewing K. Kaufmann. She's a Coachella Valley journalist who, for the last couple of years, has been following the medical marijuana story in Riverside County. I think you'll find her insights into the entire issue to be of great interest.
Sitting here with me is Kay, give me your last, Kaufmann?
Correct.
And Kay is here at the marijuana conference here, the 4th annual Therapeutic Medical Marijuana Conference in Santa Barbara. And from what I understand, I've been told, and you can tell me if this is true or not, you actually, you're a journalist and you work for a publication which we're not going to name. And you're not here as an official reporter for this publication. You're here pretty much on your own, from what I understand.
It's half and half.
Half and half?
Half and half.
So you're getting some support?
Yes, I'm getting some support, and I will be writing something for the publication off this.
What I'm curious is why you decided to come up here and attend the conference.
Well, I've been covering the story. There have been stories related to medical marijuana that I have been covering. And from the beginning, quite honestly, I think this is one of the most compelling stories, you know, in human terms. In human terms and in political terms, it's one of the most compelling stories I've run across in quite a while. My background is more in alternative journalism and political journalism than in mainstream journalism per se. But this is a story, I mean, that just crosses all boundaries because it is so human. It is very much about, we've heard it over and over again, where the people are running way ahead of the government. And it's just, how can you not write about it?
Yeah.
How can you not write about it?
The choir is attending this, and we all, feel
Precisely.
Very positive towards what has been accomplished at this conference. And tell me, what kinds of things have you gotten from this conference that you didn't know before you came?
Oh gosh, everything. The stories are legion. I mean, this whole thing about the California Medical Board pursuing, getting on the docs who are prescribing or recommending the issue of research and what the government is and isn't doing with research, the whole connection between the DEA and how they're able to stop research, the discrimination against the researchers getting published. I mean, there is story after story after story that I was not aware of. You know, now I have to go online and do the checking. But I had done checking even before I came here, had been doing some research about, you know, where to market our, you know, and this story is not being well covered. I will not say it's not being covered at all.
Well, yeah, it's obviously being covered.
But I will say that it is not being well or comprehensively covered. So that there's a lot of things people don't know that, you know, and it's a very hard thing to get these stories covered in the mainstream press.
For obvious reasons.
For obvious reasons. But that is part of my job, you know, and part of why I do what I do is, and I work where I work, is I don't want to preach to the choir.
Yes.
I work in mainstream press because I want to preach to the unconverted.
Absolutely.
And it's always a challenge.
Well, you know, we certainly, as an organization here at MAF, appreciate your efforts, and we want to encourage you to continue. So, anytime you need anything from us, please feel free to call. And I want to thank you for coming on our show today, and continue on with the work.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Ms. Kaufmann's stories have reached tens of thousands of people, letting them know about medical marijuana and about the Marijuana Anti-Prohibition Project, the patient support group in the Inland Empire. And listen, you need to get involved. You know, you've heard some very interesting interviews today. Come on down and meet some patients. Come on down and find out what's really going down in the real nitty-gritty of medical marijuana. How do you do that? You come to one of our meetings. We have 2 meetings every month in the Inland Empire. On the first Sunday of every month at 3 p.m., we meet at the Cathedral City Public Library, which is located at 33520 Date Palm Drive. We generally have speakers. You can meet patients. We've been meeting there for almost 5 years now. So we're kind of a fixture at the Cathedral City Public Library. Make yourself a fixture and come to one of those meetings. The first Sunday of every month at 3 p.m. We have a second meeting, and that is on the second Wednesday of every month at 7:30 p.m. up in the high desert in the town of Joshua Tree. That meeting is at the Joshua Tree Community Center, which is at 6171 Sunburst Avenue in Joshua Tree. Once again, you'll meet patients, you'll have lecturers, there's a lot of information you can pick up. So, how do you get hold of us? Give us a call at 760-799-2055. There's an interesting message, and if I don't answer the phone, you can leave a message and I will get back to you. You can also check out our website at www.marijuananews.org. That's not .com, great website too, but ours is a little bit better. That's www.marijuananews.org. I'd like to thank you very much for joining us tonight on Marijuana, Compassion, and Common Sense. Tune in our next show. We've got more great interviews about medical marijuana and marijuana law reform. And your team's mental health.
I mean, how often do we hear police officers say, my brother, my sister, my aunt is using because none of the other drugs work? But will they go to Sheriff Corona and say to him, let's get on the other side of the bandwagon and support this now?
The marijuana, what's the problem?
This story is not being well covered.
I am less worried about certain potential harmful effects.
I concluded that marijuana is a necessary nutrient.
Well, at a time when people were dying all around me, we were doing anything we could to try and save people's lives.
They should reclassify the drug and take it out of Schedule 1 and put it into a schedule that can be monitored and dispensed.